And it is a late evening of August 15th, 2016, actually almost August 16th, 2 minutes to midnight. We are talking with Kyle Rearden of thelastbastille.com. That is spelled BASTILLE.com. A lot of good information on the website. He's been on this channel before. Check out the Liberty Intelligence Files. So tonight we're going to talk about controlled schizophrenia. And some of you are probably already familiar with the term controlled opposition. But we're going to take a closer look at controlled schizophrenia. What in the hell has happened to the Liberty Movement? Kyle, welcome. Your opening thoughts.
Well, my opening thoughts are that I think this concept of controlled schizophrenia, which is a term and a concept that was originally coined by a certain libertarian back in the 1960s, I think actually answers a lot of the questions that you and I, Alex, have brought up in earlier editions of the Liberty Intelligence Files, and specifically the episodes, the podcast dealing with the Ron Paul supporters, the former Ron Paul supporters now supporting Donald Trump, perhaps even some of the race baiting that you and I have discussed and so forth. I think this concept that was written about all those decades ago in a lot of ways foreshadowed something like what we've seen recently.
Okay, so you have an article that you just completed, and I guess we're going to go over some of the stuff that's in this article. So I think the question that we've been asking, why are people celebrating Donald Trump, promoting Donald Trump, using their websites to run PR? You know, and I said, well, there's a little bit of speculation there. You know, it could be a little bit of mind control, maybe a little bit of spiritual sickness, spiritual warfare. But then again, it could be something very scientific that we can look at very logically. What is this controlled schizophrenia?
Well, I think it's probably best to think of controlled schizophrenia simply defined as the mental state of a opportunistic citizen serf who practices doublethink, yet who still acts in their own best interest. So essentially somebody who, I guess you could say in some sense, is a hypocrite, but you could also, if you want to be kinder about it, is intellectually dishonest, at least in some sense.
Okay, examples. Donald Trump says, maybe if I'm president, we would have to shoot down those Russian jets. And then people are going to ignore that and say that he has a policy of non-intervention. Oh, that's the latest news with Donald Trump and the manufactured news spin. He's anti-war, yes, but at the same time, he's going to go after the barbarians. That's right. He's going to destroy ISIS. And there's a lot of controlled schizophrenia with this. You know, he's talking about going after ISIS, and then he comes around and says, well, Obama is the founder of ISIS. It's a conspiracy. You know, so people are able to somehow balance conspiracy worldviews with neocon views and talking points.
Yes, unfortunately, and it's very much that doublethink. What George Orwell wrote about is the concept of basically believing in two complete opposites ideas absolutely and completely simultaneously at the same time. And I think in a lot of ways, controlled schizophrenia, that concept, is a way of explaining when, I guess you could say, self-identified libertarians are doing exactly the same thing. And this is what Rayo, who is the individual back in the 60s, was writing about this. I think there are some quotes. I think I'll just start off with one here that kind of explains at least some of what he was getting at. He basically, the context for that leads up to him mentioning about controlled schizophrenia was that he was trying to hypothesize, Alex, about people who did at least claim to value individual liberty, at least to some degree, and distinguishing between those who claim to value it versus those who are actually living it in their own lives, you know, consistently and so forth. And so he was trying to make sense of those people. He described it in terms of like people who were in favor of like 5 to 10% freedom as opposed to 90 to 95% freedom. So he was really trying to focus on what is this 5 to 10% proportion. And I think the following quote is probably the best place to start off, and it's actually where he coins the term controlled schizophrenia. Quote, "The lower maximum is exemplified in contemporary society by many a successful middle American. He lives conventionally, but takes advantage of some of the easier, more obvious loopholes. He pays income taxes, but hires a tax accountant to maximize deductions. He registers for the draft, but goes to college in hope of being made a technician instead of a target. His mental state is one of controlled schizophrenia. He believes most of the statist myths in which he was indoctrinated, yet maintains a modicum of skepticism. He goes to church, or at least accepts their standard of morality, but is not above having a drink at a nude bar. He is largely rational in his work, but keeps his rationality compartmented. He does not, dares not, critically examine his life as a whole." Close quote. So that's how Rayo was able to bring forth this notion of controlled controlled schizophrenia, Alex, where basically you have people believing in these two complete opposite ideas of, being in favor of freedom, but then on the other hand, supporting the establishment as it stands.
Right, and as you were reading that, I was thinking of a few of these doublethink examples that are taking place within the Trump campaign. So we see him talking about the mainstream media. Oh, the mainstream media, can't trust the mainstream media. Referring to the mainstream media on what network? Fox News with Sean Hannity. He's talking about the mainstream media lying on Fox News with the Fox News mainstream media commentator bobbing like a bobblehead. As we've also seen Russia Today do the same thing. Mainstream media promote when they are a branch of the mainstream media. And so I think this is another example that we're seeing right now with, this ridiculous doublethink where, wow, it's like there's a larger programming taking place. There's lots of different types of controlled schizophrenia that we're seeing. I mean, what are some examples that stand out for you in addition to what I've already mentioned?
I think it really is just, it really is the sheer number of Ron Paul supporters who are publicly avowed as such, and people can go and double check their histories, whether on their YouTube channels or wherever else. And hell, I mean, even the picture for the article, I actually show their faces and name names, and then towards the bottom of the article, I do name names as to some of these specific individuals. Actually, one particular example serves is Dr. Walter Block's formation of a group called Libertarians for Trump. That, I think, is actually probably the worst example, or at least one of the very worst, where he just outright said, we must support Donald Trump because he is going to get us closer to the promised land of liberty. And the guy has a doctorate in economics, so he's not a stupid man. But that's kind of where it's at now, is you have Libertarians for Trump being really kind of. So again, how do you go from Ron Paul, whom Dr. Walter Block supported, to Donald Trump? Apparently, it might as well be lesser of two evils at this point, as far as how they're falsely viewing this.
Right. How do you go from saying that politics are corrupt and say that Republicans and Democrats are both corrupt, another way to say it, two wings of the same vulture, and then support someone a part of that establishment simply on faith? Now, how is this done? How is this considered rational thought? It's done on faith. It's almost like a religion for our particular day and age, which is troublesome, that we can be whipped into these micro religious movements where there's messiahs that rise literally out of the TV. It's troubling. Where is this going to go with technology and more people having their thoughts shaped by them externally and through interfacing with technology. Don't want to get too far out there, but it's interesting how someone can become a political messiah overnight, where they may have not even been on the scene like a couple of years ago, where they can make that the issue. So on one side of the mouth, we're saying the media is corrupt and politicians are corrupt, but in this case, we're going to make this all that we're about and all that we support. This guy and anyone with any independent thought that is not on the Trump bandwagon, we'll just call them a Hillary supporter. We'll just call them a communist. We'll just call them paid and paid for and co-opted by George Soros. And these are really infantile arguments.
Yes, they are. And there's another quote by Rayo about this that I think also answers another portion of the question regarding this practice of doublethink, even by these celebrity libertarians, or celebritarians for short. Quote, "Whether one will be happier as a free man or as a slave partly depends on the individual. But this choice is not open to most libertarians. Relative contentment in servitude is possible only for those who believe in it. Most libertarians are too independent and well-informed. For libertarians, the choice is between freedom and neurosis." What became of those libertarians of 5 years ago who gave up or never tried achieving personal liberty? Of people I knew, one is now a Catholic, another is a Mormon, another committed himself to a mental hospital. Many are occupied with chronic ailments, close quote. So even back then, during the 1960s, hence in the earlier quote, there was a reference to the draft, of course, which was a big deal at the time. And Dr. Murray Rothbard, of course, in his own literature, would mention the draft constantly in the Vietnam War. So during that same time period, Rayo noticed this happening, this controlled schizophrenia. And I think he's right. The choice really is between freedom and neurosis. And I think what we're seeing, Alex, with this controlled schizophrenia by the celebritarians, by these opinion makers, or so-called, in other portions of the alternative media, who are saying, well, yeah, you remember when I supported Ron Paul? Well, now I support Donald Trump. And then Walter Block specifically forming the so-called libertarians for Trump. This is the neuroses that Rayo warned about decades ago. I sincerely think, Alex, this was all foreshadowed, that unless libertarians get their damn act together, this will happen again, and unfortunately it has. And this is the proof.
Well, I think that there are periods where there seems to be more people awake and more people going into a state of apathy and ignorance, and almost as if they have no intuition, which I do believe that some humans have, or at different levels of it. But I mean, you feel someone's eyes on you and you turn around and there's someone there. That's non-local awareness. So it seems like there's periods where people just aren't as tapped in and they're easily misled. And so I think that this research that comes out of the 1960s on controlled schizophrenia shows us how long we as humans have been contending with this. Now, the question is, what is really driving this? Could mind control be at the root cause of controlled schizophrenia? Is this just something that can naturally happen to someone who falls out of a state of mental health, Kyle?
I think it has a lot to do with an article I put out right before controlled schizophrenia, which was about political crusading, which was also another term that Rayo coined, and I wrote an article on just a little bit ago. I think ultimately that's what this is going back to, is the folks who are libertarians for Trump, so-called, really are political crusaders. They believe that you can change the system by working from inside it, and you can grassroots lobby, and you can sue the government, and you can have your protests and vote, and all of this nonsense that has been disproven, much of it scientifically disproven. If people want to follow up more on why voting doesn't work, Brian Kaplan's The Myth of the Rational Voter is an excellent resource that I do plan on writing a book report before the election. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's been scientifically proven that voters are irrational. Hence why in a lot of campaign rhetoric for any of this left-right paradigm nonsense, it's all emotively driven with there's no semblance of reality. So of course, if people's emotions, if the emotions of the voters are going to be tugged this way or that, or even in an alleged third direction by someone like a Gary Johnson, then of course people's emotions are going to be jostled which way, and then they're going to end up making a bad decision.
Can I just say, I think Gary Johnson was kind of a clown, and it's not to hurt his feelings or anything. I understand he's supposedly the lesser of all the evils. I remember when this guy was in support of going into Africa during the Coney 2012 hype. And there's a clip of him on Fox News discussing going in there with ground troops. So there might be a little controlled schizophrenia with the whole Gary Johnson thing. And, there's a number of times where he's kind of boasted that he could be the president, which it's not really logical, to see him getting more than a few points, if you will. And with regards to Trump, you would think that his supporters would see through the plastic, and it's very plastic, presentation behind it all, from the very letters on the sign, from the very design, the very packaging of it all, and the repeat use of buzzwords, just the overly arrogant. Oh yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna make. I can't do an impersonation, and I've watched countless videos. It's troubling. Seeing people that should know better, that at one point in their career in the alternative media, they showed more independent thought. And I'm trying to keep an open mind here without rushing to judgment as to what could be triggering such hero worship and blind support in the political system. I do believe, and it's awkward to talk about humanity in the third party when I'm a part of it, but it seems like they know what they're doing with these colors, these symbols, these sigils, these shapes, and who knows, God knows what else in this era of technology. I cannot discount mind control, subliminal mind control, even audio, non-visual, which could be coming through the internet. But I'd like to also explore some of the more logical explanations as well. What I certainly do believe, humans, by far, the masses, even if someone's intelligent, there's like this mass way of thinking, of receiving information, easily programmed. It's like the masses are easily programmed and led. Even if some of them are intelligent, they can still fall into this like macabre, sick hero worship. I think that this is really like looking deeper at some of the questions of life, trying to understand how human beings can be so easily duped by religions, financial institutions, politicians, so on and so forth. Because obviously, I'm kind of going on a mini tangent here, the entire history of humanity includes people being duped by others that have misled them and betrayed them.
Yes, very much so. And any student of history can really see that. And I don't know, perhaps that would be a topic for a future podcast. That's actually rather intriguing, going through at least some historical notes and seeing where people were duped in various things. Yes, I think if people really also understood political crusading, and maybe that perhaps too should be another podcast all by itself on political crusading, I think the faith that is placed in working inside of the system in order to change it from within, which has not brought liberty to anyone, but in fact exponentially grows the power and size of the state, be way beyond constitutional limitations, is a truth that is really almost never talked about, not even in a lot of the alternative media, although it'll be brought up here and there in transitory passing. And so a lot of these libertarians for Trump type supporters are really ignoring all of that. Heck, Rayo mentioned it in elsewhere in some of his other literature about how he was having back and forths with the political crusaders, and they would just routinely ignore any of his concerns or any evidence he brought up. So I do think perhaps maybe there is, much like the other podcast we did earlier in the Liberty Intelligence Files, maybe there is cognitive impairment, actually. I think maybe a quite important factor here on the part of the political crusaders who think that if you vote that archetype of the strongman into seizing, to use a Lord of the Rings reference, the Ring of Mordor, the White House, then somehow he will bring you liberty, he will secure your liberty for you, when of course reality does not show that to be the case. And so about controlled schizophrenia, Rayo had one other quote I would like to read, where Rayo kind of summed up a lot of controlled schizophrenia this way. Quote, freedom does indeed need more full-time professionals, not collective movement preachers seeking a coterie of followers, but explorers, inventors, developers of liberated lifeways, close quote. So there, he was kind of bringing in some of what he had mentioned earlier about his arguments against political crusading, Alex. But what Rayo was really getting at is that he noticed all those decades ago that there were folks who really wanted to play the mainline political game of playing games with government elections, of getting in front of cameras and saying, if you support me, you finance my campaign, you go into a booth on election day and scratch nonsense on a piece of paper or push a button, then I promise to hand you the best liberty you could ever have. I will set you free. And that's not how real life works. That's cartoon politics is what it is. Cartoon politics says that you can vote your way to freedom. And there was actually a very good libertarian adage that more or less says that if voting actually worked to set us free, it'd be illegal.
Yeah, and another phrase that you mentioned in your article is psychological paralysis. And I think that's with all of this political distraction, I mean, it's obvious there's a lot of issues that are just completely no longer discussed. That used to be some of the main topics for some of these individuals in the alternative media. It's like there's a whole host of things that are just not touched anymore. I think another form of controlled schizophrenia that we're seeing, our people used to scream about how corrupt the media is, how corrupt politicians are, foaming at the mouth level, screaming at the top of the lungs level, in game now, this happening now, and I'm not just Alex Jones, but others that have used that level of intensity of now, this moment, now, at any moment, that type of a thing. To go from that, if they are actually being genuine in their concerns, if they've been genuine all these years in their concerns, and not just doing this for the attention or for the AdSense, in a very lucrative niche market, if one knows how to market themselves and use the right keywords. Oh, sure, there's a lot you can do. But for people to go from that to I think in some cases wanting to even get Donald Trump's attention, with some of these people that, for whatever reason, aren't seeing Trump as we believe that he is, a deceiver, a liar, a person that can bring great damage to this country, a person basically a lot like a lot of just about every other politician and candidate, very much unlike Ron Paul. And so for people to think that they can go from, oh, the whole system's corrupt and we're in danger of this and danger of that, but hey, let me do something to maybe get on the right side of Donald Trump in case he becomes the president. I want to be on, in the eyes of Donald Trump on the right side of history. I think there's a little bit of controlled schizophrenia there. If the situation's so serious, then why would someone be able to be bought off with the idea of extra attention from Donald Trump or being able to get on Donald Trump's good side? How would Donald Trump actually himself genuinely be able to reverse all of this damage that's been done in our name? So, I mean, a lot of questions come up.
Yes, they do. And as we kind of begin to wind down here, at least on this particular topic, there was one comment I did receive on the article, on a reposting of the article on a different website by apparently a reader. Now, his comment is a little bit on the longer side. I'm going to see if I can squish it down for purposes of time. The user's name was DWIN Blood, like Dwin Blood, I think is how the username is. He said the following, and I want the audience to really pay attention to this because I think you're probably going to see maybe some degree of cognitive impairment. And I think, ironically, there is the guy commenting on the article on controlled schizophrenia probably has some controlled schizophrenia. So I think this kind of proves the thesis more than anything else. So here's what Dwin Blood said, quote, I think primarily it is people who still are locked into the two-party shell game and think electing one of the people media force feeds them makes a difference. The same fear that is benefiting Hillary is also benefiting Trump. Anyone that knows Hillary and the things she has done in the last 3 or 4 decades is likely truly terrified of her being president. Not for the things she says, but simply because they know the things she has already done when she had power. So they latch onto Trump like he is the answer. Yet Trump says such outlandish things at times it has often left me wondering if the sole reason he is here is to scare people into voting for Hillary. Because he is also proof that people are generally in politics more frightened of words coming out of someone's mouth than they are things the person has actually done. Simplified, more afraid of a person who says they are going to kill someone than they are of the person who has actually killed someone. Couple that with extremely short-term memories, parenthesis, lazy, question mark. The politician's latest speech is generally the only one they remember, so they totally miss how they are so often 180 degrees from what they said in just the speech before. Yet largely the Ron Paul people supporting Trump seem to think Trump is anti-establishment and that they are picking the lesser of two evils. This is my opinion, in parentheses, edit. I realize it seems like I agree with them. I was indicating the next part is my opinion, end parentheses. Now, before I continue with Dwin Blood's comment, please, for the audience, listen to this next part, because this is where the crazy kookiness, the controlled schizophrenia, the cognitive impairment, I think, really comes into play. So please listen for this next part. Quote, as an anarchist, I do not believe we should be voting. Yet I also still wrestle with this because we do not live in an anarchistic society yet, far from it. So if I vote, it is for people I see as potentially moving us closer to that. For me, that'll generally be a libertarian, capital L, candidate. I do not think my vote ultimately means anything, so for me, it is still me wrestling with my own conscience and not quite eschewing the system as much as I'd like to. I haven't convinced myself doing nothing will bring us closer to where I want to be, yet I know voting is also an endorsement of system and an authority over me they should not have, close quote. So again, that was Mr. Dwin Blood who commented.
Sorry to cut you off. So we can also see this controlled schizophrenia with people that have screamed about vote fraud. Completely put their faith in the system that, by the way, is using YouTube to say, if you don't vote, the terrorists win. You know, you would think that commercials like that on YouTube. If someone's, on YouTube and they're watching Trump videos, protest videos, fights in the street videos, all these horrible things that are happening at these rallies now. All of a sudden these ads pop up. If you don't vote, the terrorists win. And what else? You're going to put us on a list while you're at it?
Yeah, I'm probably on a few myself.
Seems like a veiled threat there, but lots of controlled schizophrenia that we're seeing on just different levels here. It's you could just build upon it, but the Obama supporters came across a schizophrenic to me with the Obama sticker on one side and the coexist sticker on the other. In Portland, Oregon in 2008, I'm looking at this as like schizophrenia, and I called it that then, not quote-unquote controlled schizophrenia. So it's good to know that this term's out there and to identify it and discuss it, because we've obviously this is obviously a part of the human condition that we can see in the Obama term, and we can see from the Trump supporters. And I know that they don't want to be compared to each other, but I mean, I do see a strong comparison between the Trump and Obama platform on the campaign. Not exactly, but promise of positive change around the corner. Just don't worry about it. It's really just that simple. They may have different ways of doing it, but I think we could sum it up. Yeah, they marketed themselves to an aspect of America. I think this is unique social engineering, that they can custom uniquely market themselves to half the country, and at the same time piss off the other half of the country. And there'll be enough propaganda to where the other half of the country, that other candidate or president is the devil, is the Antichrist, as well as their supporters. They are the worst of the worst, which isn't really fair because, it takes two to tango. It's really both Democrats and Republicans. But they have this controlled schizophrenia. No, it's just you guys. It's the left or it's the right. And you look at each one of it and how the media has played their role in it. Somehow or another, enough humans fall for it. They don't see the patterns. They don't go, well, hey, wait a minute. I'm scratching my beard here. This looks kind of suspicious. Hey, this is propaganda. Oh my God, this is propaganda. No. Most people don't recognize propaganda. They just respond to the propaganda. And in their minds, it could be peace on Main Street, wherever Joe Schmo is, listening to the Alex Jones Show. There may not be a single person from the Middle East in his town. But every day, for several hours, images of his mind play out of the Islamists invading his corn-eaten Oklahoma town. His corn-eaten Oklahoma town invaded by a Muslim. Can you imagine the horror in this poor man's mind? And all of that controlled schizophrenia, not even realizing the distorted truth about ISIS, to say out of what to hear, CIA created ISIS, Israel created ISIS. Now let's kill everybody at once. Oh my God, let's just build a wall around us. And let's just make sure we swallow the key while we're at it as we lock ourselves in this cell, Kyle.
Yeah, pretty much. That's, I'll paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me and I don't remember it exactly. But yeah, like Etienne de la Boétie said in The Politics of Obedience, to paraphrase, people will, slit its own throat when it supports tyrants. And unfortunately, what you have here is a situation where you have wannabe kings and queen, or in Hillary's case, queen, right? You have the wannabe monarchs who are tyrants, and people are supporting the tyrants. And so, unless something fundamentally changes, which I don't see happening anytime soon, tyranny will continue. Statism will continue. The authoritarians will rule as they have for only God knows how long. And that's pretty much kind of it. So that's not to sound defeatist, that's being realistic. And Rayo was also of the same temperament. And elsewhere in his writings, which probably would be best for another podcast, he went into more detail about how it's probably better to give up any notion of utopias in the sense of whether it's reformed society as a whole schemes, as he put it, or a worldwide free society, as it were, but really get with each other and form like mini cultures, enclaves of freedom, to put it one way. And that's where Rayo was more coming at it from. Mm-hmm. And it's in a lot of ways, it was because of the controlled schizophrenia that he noticed in the 1960s. That's like, 50 years ago? Something on that order? So this is in some ways, and Alex, this is why I really like reading books and older, things more of an historical nature rather than necessarily the news cycle. Because then when I do have colleagues of mine, whether you or other folks in the alternative media whom I trust, tell me about things in the news cycle, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I just read something in the bloppity blop that this very same phenomenon happened, 70, 100 years ago, whatever the time frame is. In this case, with controlled schizophrenia, it's 50 years ago. And almost formulaically, whether it's Hegelian dialectic or false flag operations, this same stuff is playing out virtually the same, obviously with details like, names, dates, places being different, but the formula remains the same.
Well, here we go. you have the Clinton Foundation being a topic on Fox News on a regular basis. We got to flush this out, Hillary and the Clinton Foundation, and there are ties between Putin and the Clinton Foundation. Money that he sent. There's money that Trump allegedly gave the Clinton Foundation. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the Clinton Foundation. Let's talk about Russia and the uranium deal they made. So Russia gets uranium from the United States from some deal they literally made with, drumroll please, the Clinton Foundation. So I'm not saying there's nothing there. But there are people out there saying, Clinton Foundation, hang this bitch, rape her in prison, which I just think is a little bit macabre. I mean, maybe we should just kind of explore that. What's up with all this rape, Hillary in prison nonsense? Or just all this obsession. Hillary for president. I mean, there's there's a lot of people out there that probably could qualify for prison. I don't have anything personally invested in Hillary Clinton. I mean, I shouldn't even have to say that. I mean, literally, I'm not so sure she's not reptilian, but that's not the purpose of this podcast. But I'm seriously, like she does look like a freak. I don't know what's going on. I don't think about it too hard. I know that she's just another puppet, and there's a sea of puppets out there, and I don't have to lose my shit over freaking Hillary, But I see people that are like just taking, oh, whoa, you're like, whoa. Like, whoa, it's all come down to her. Like, she literally is the devil, Kyle. She's the devil to these people. Like, oh my God. Like, there's no one bigger than her and Soros. And this was not what people talked about 4 years ago. Certainly not 8. We can go back in the timeline. People were not ranting about Hillary for prison. There were other people they may have talked about at brief for prison. It was really a joke. Really? You're really going to arrest George Bush? And then there's other people that are like, yeah, we're going to arrest him. Like, no. You guys can have your protests out wherever, but I remember at one point in the fake news cycle, they were starting to push that, there's warrants out for the arrest of the former candidates. No. No, some people talk about it, they get all whipped up, they get all angry, maybe tip over a few cars at best, storm a freeway, a couple street fights, and that's about it, and we go to the next cycle 4 years later. It's like controlled schizophrenia all the way around.
Yes.
I can go on and on and on. It's hitting everybody. To the people that are screaming about Trump, fuck Trump. Yes, but even in that paradigm, Trump would be a part of the system. He wouldn't be operating on his own. So they have to still look at the system. And people are taken away from the real system or having a real dialogue about what the system is, and they're just redirected on those they really hate and those they really love in the political arena. So it's like the power establishment, whatever they are, whatever it is, it understands the way humans think and the way that it responds to certain stimuli and certain words, certain branding, a person coming out with a sense of authority. I'm going to fix this, yeah. I'm going to do this, yeah. And, just the psychological effect of maybe one person being designated to play that role. And so if, say, all the candidates are bought and paid for, and they're acting on stage, you can have a scenario where, the actors have their job to do and it's stick to the script. So 9 out of the 10 actors, they're there to play the fool. 1 out of the 10 actors will be the only one to say the right words that, unfortunately, the masses don't go, well, wait a minute, this is so obviously set up and directed. No, they just respond to the fact that only one person is showing the appearance of being the lesser of the evils. And by appearances alone, and by script alone, they will throw their support behind a deception. And that is the controlled schizophrenia, I think, that we're seeing.
Yes, very much so. And so I think in a lot of ways, the concept of controlled schizophrenia, as I was mentioning earlier, really kind of goes hand in glove with political crusading. I really do think that controlled schizophrenia explains the why of it, whereas political crusading explains arguably more the how. But obviously that's the political crusading is a topic for another time. But yeah, to kind of close out on controlled schizophrenia, I think this is a recurring problem. And until this is fixed in some way, shape, or form, I think come next election cycle, I think it's a pretty safe prediction at this point, seeing as this goes back 50 years, that this will probably happen again, more likely than not. And I hate to say that, but never let it be said that I was utopian. Obviously, I do want the human race to be free, but as it is right now, apparently some people really aren't ready for freedom, especially when they're begging strongmen archetypes to enslave them and their neighbors. And that's just where it is right now.
And if the audience would like to read the full article by Kyle, Controlled Schizophrenia, Why Celebritarians Are Glorifying Donald Trump, click the link down below in the description. Kyle, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.